Hello, everybody. It's Joshua Cohen, the student loan lawyer. I'm here for another edition of Student Loan Talk. Today is April 15th, 2020. It's tax day, or at least it would be if we were not going through everything we're going through. Today, not being tax day, I wanted to talk some more about some student loan stuff and keep everyone updated as to what's going on. So, again, I've reviewed before the CARES Act and how it protects people with student loans. Specifically, protects those of you that have direct loans. If you have a loan that's in default that has been passed to the Department of Education under the FFEL program, those are protected. Otherwise, you are not protected. Your private loans are not protected. FFEL loans, perhaps you borrowed through Navient, Sallie Mae, any bank, those aren't protected under the CARES Act. So if you have more questions about that, I would tell you to go look at, I would tell you to go look at my past videos for a little bit more explanation about that. If you want to get protected, you can simply consolidate your FFELs. Those will become direct loans and they will be protected by the CARES Act. The only downfall is if you have IBR, time accumulated towards forgiveness, you will lose all of that and start from scratch. If you're only losing 2 or 3 years, it's probably worth it. If you're losing 10 years, it may not be worth it. That said, I did have one question coming into this that someone was asking about. So as you know, with the CARES Act, again, direct loans are protected. And one of those protections is a 6-month administrative forbearance on payments. So no payments from now until October 1st are due. Sorry, September 30th. So starting in October, payments will be due. But one thing that they've said that's under the regulations, under the law, is that even though you're not making payments, you do still get credit towards either IDR forgiveness or public service loan forgiveness. And the question for me was someone checked with Fed Loan and they had not yet received credit for these next 6 months of payments. And I want to clarify, you're not going to receive credit for them until those months pass because they also have to assume that you are still working for an eligible company, either the government or a 501c3. If you've been furloughed, as far as I know, you're still on payroll, so that counts. If you've been canned and you're unemployed, then you're not getting credit towards public service loan forgiveness. You're not working for a qualified employer. As soon as you can get reemployed, then you will start accumulating time. You're not going to see the 6 months credit until October, November, December, when Fed Loan starts counting these 6 months that are coming through. Also, something else that you need to do so that Fed Loan tracks is to file the employer certification form. And this you simply hand to your HR department, and your HR department will verify that you are employed and that you are full-time. That then gets sent to Fed Loan Servicing, who will then start counting and tracking you for 12 months. The law doesn't require you to do this every year, but Fed Loan does. And the reasoning is they don't know if you're still working there. So the form is only good for 12 months at a time. You send it in again, and then they will continue tracking. Now, there's a bit of semantics here. Fed Loan tracks. If they're not tracking your payments, you're still qualifying as long as you have the right job and a direct loan and you're on the right kind of payment plan, an IDR payment plan. It's just Fed Loan doesn't know to track you if you haven't sent in your employer certification form. So that's the only issue to worry about, but it's not a huge deal. I keep mentioning Fed Loan. They are in charge of tracking. If your servicer isn't Fed Loan, you can transfer by simply filing the employer certification form. When you do that, it goes to Fed Loan. Fed Loan says, wait a minute, we don't have your loan. They go get it, and they bring it over. Your IDR payment should stay the same, but what you want to do is as soon as you hear you're reassigned to Fed Loan, contact them and make sure that they still have you enrolled in IDR and that your payment plan is still the same. So that said, again, your direct loans are still protected by CARES. You've got 6 months of no payments until October. You have 0% interest until October. One of my other favorite questions is, oh, there's no interest. I should make extra payments. If you're going to get public service loan forgiveness, I don't know why you're making extra payments. It's going to be forgiven. If you're going to get IDR forgiveness, which yes takes 20 to 25 years, again, I don't know that it makes sense to make extra payments. More importantly, the way the Higher Education Act works, when your payments are made, it first goes towards this month's interest, and then all of the other months of interest that have added up that haven't been paid because your IDR payment is less than interest, and then you hit principal. So many of you are entering this next 6 months with no new interest, but you may have hundreds or thousands of dollars of unpaid interest from previous months and years. So please don't bother making payments. It's going to go towards interest that you haven't paid, and you won't pay because you're going to get IDR forgiveness. Understand the math before you start throwing money down the well. On the flip side, if you're on a regular amortization payment, if you're on a 25 or a 10-year amortization payment and your goal is to pay off the loan and you have the ability to, yes, making payments right now, if you can, would be a smart move because now 100% of that payment is going towards principal. You have no monthly interest to be paid. But again, if your finances allow for that, right now we are dealing with the pandemic. Some of you have more limited income. So if you don't have the ability to pay it, don't. Worry about your housing, worry about your food, worry about your health. If you don't have a face mask, spend some money on that first. These are the things to look at. Your budget still runs the same. It's based on how much money you have coming in. If you're one of the unfortunate that you've been put onto unemployment, then I don't know that it makes sense to spend money on your student loans if you have that administrative forbearance. Speaking of which, one thing you might want to do is, even though you don't have to make payments, if you're on IDR and your income has suffered, now's a good time to ask for a recalculation. You can ask for a recalculation of your IDR. It'll drop your payment starting in October. No payment until then, but it'll kick in October, and it's valid until your recertification. Now, if you were scheduled for an IDR recertification anytime between now and September, that has been pushed 6 months. So the April ones have been pushed to October, May until November, so on and so forth. If your recertification was in September, they've pushed it until, I'm not doing the math in my head, April-ish or so. And you should have received notification of the administrative forbearance and that no payments are due. Starting in August, under the regs, 6 letters have to be sent to you letting you know that payments will restart in October and when your recertification is due. So one question I'm also getting is, well, if my recertification is normally due in July, can I still do it in July? And my gut says no, because they have already pushed you. You won't be able to do a recertification. Whatever your payment is now, it will continue until your recertification in October or whenever. Again, that's why I say if you've suffered an economic loss, now's a great time to ask for a recalculation. It'll kick in October and be there until you recertify. So that's what I have for the direct loans. If you have an FFEL, again, now is a great time to consider either bringing it over to direct loans and getting a cheaper payment through Repay starting in October, or if you don't want to, if you want to stay with your FFEL and you're on an IBR plan, you can have income-based repayment with your FFEL. Again, look at doing a recalculation. Now, your recertification dates have not changed on an FFEL. So if you're due in July, it's still due in July. But you can ask for a recalculation now to at least affect your payments until July. The recertification window is 60 days. So if your recertification is in July, they will not accept recertification until May. So you might want to start recalculation now. Or if you can get by, you can always ask for a forbearance until it's time to recertify, and then recertify with whatever the income's going on at that time. Here's the key piece of information. When you do the recertification, it asks, number one, have you filed your taxes in the last 2 years? Check the appropriate box. But more importantly, after that, it asks, has your income decreased since you filed your taxes? The point here is you can use the smaller payment, the smaller number. If you're making less money now than what your taxes show, then you want to say, yes, my income has decreased. And this will get you a smaller recertification payment. If you've gotten a raise since you filed your taxes, you don't have to tell anybody. They don't even ask you that. They will use your tax money unless you say, my income has decreased. So again, that's another tip. Even if you're on a temporary, if your income has gone down temporarily now, maybe you've been furloughed, so your income right now has decreased, that's what you want to use when you recertify. And as long as that's still going when it's time to recertify. If your recertification isn't for a good 4, 5, 6, 7 months, then do a recalculation based on your current income. Yes, your income is going to go back up, but that's not part of the process. You don't have to tell them about increases until it's time to recertify. So those are the things that we want to look at. And I'm not seeing any questions here, so I will continue talking about some other things in the news. One thing I haven't posted about yet is, so Joe Biden is now the leading Democrat for the Democratic nomination for president, and he has come out with a proposal to forgive and to lower some student loan debt. And real briefly here, I'm looking at my notes. It would forgive, under Biden's proposal, we would forgive all undergraduate federal student loan debt if you attended a public college, university, as well as historically black colleges and universities, and even private minority-serving institutions. Any borrower that earns less than $125,000 a year would be eligible for other kinds of student loan forgiveness. And he has supported what the Democrats tried to get into the CARES Act, which was a $10,000 across-the-board forgiveness, which will help many but not all. So that's a little bit about what he has proposed. We'll see how that expands as we get closer to the election in November. Something else that I think is even more important that's come out is, for those of you that are aware of what the borrower defense to repayment is, which again, if you think you were defrauded by the school that you went to, or there are major misrepresentations, they lied about their job placement rates or things of that sort, you can apply for a defense to repayment plan. These are more advertised for for-profit schools, but there are other schools that fall into this category. The Department of Education has held off on processing them for more than a year. They were sued, and Secretary DeVos was actually held in contempt for continuing to garnish folks' wages, even though the law says she's not allowed to. So they have reached a settlement in which, of course, the Department of Education claims no responsibility for wrongdoing. With this settlement, the Department of Education now has 18 months to process, ready for this, 170,000 borrower defense to repayment applications that are sitting there, waiting to be processed. They have 18 months to process all of those. That's, 10,000 of those a month. Interest that has accrued while they're waiting is going to be waived, regardless of what the decision is, if they get forgiveness or not. And this is fun. If the department takes longer than 18 months to come up with a decision, 30% of the borrower's balance will be discharged, with an additional 30% for every additional month that it takes them to decide. What this tells me is that they've ordered a whole bunch of rubber stamps, and I expect to see a lot of denials, but we're hoping they do this the right way. We'll see. Also, now this is fun. If the department continues to do collection activity, forced collection activity, such as wage garnishment and things of that sort, or taking tax refunds, the borrower will receive 80% forgiveness of their loan balance. So this is quite interesting. I know quite a few people that would welcome the wage garnishment in exchange for an 80% forgiveness on their loans. If you have a $100,000 loan and they continue a wage garnishment, your loan balance will now be reduced to $20,000. So this is pretty stiff. We will see what happens. If any of you have filed a defense to repayment application and are waiting to hear, please feel free to keep me in the loop. I would be happy to help enforce the 30% forgiveness or the 80% forgiveness, whichever it is. Happy to also put you in touch with reporters that are doing stories on these. So that's pretty much it. There hasn't been any other updates with the CARES Act. I know Congress is going back to put some more funding in there. There is talk of doing additional student loan safeguards, the biggest of which is to encompass the FFEL program into the CARES Act and protections for them. Right now there isn't any. And really, I'm not seeing those lenders step up and do anything. I am, however, seeing private student loan lenders stepping up and offering a little bit more than they normally do. Normally, they'll allow up to 3 years of forbearance. I am seeing many of them stepping up and offering special forbearances during this time of up to 3 or 4 months. Some of them are waiving interest. Some of them are just delaying the payments and then just tacking it on to the back of the loan, much like mortgage or car finance companies are doing. So there are some useful things out there. And so my advice is, if you have a private student loan, contact your lender and see what they're offering. I'm also seeing some state agencies step up, with their private loans or loans that are administered through state agencies. I know New York in particular is stopping all collections on New York state loans. So that's good to see. And I've seen a couple of other states doing that as well. I can't remember off the top of my head. I do know that VSAC on their private loans, their alternative loans or Alpine loans, I believe they call them, they have stopped doing collection efforts where they intercept state tax refunds. That's something that a lot of state agency loans do have the right to do, is to offset state tax refunds. I do know that VSAC has stopped doing that. I have an email from them stating such. Again, New York is doing the same thing. I'm seeing that in a lot of states, and that makes sense. A lot of people are filing their tax refunds now because they need the money. That makes sense. And to be able to keep it. Now, state refunds aren't normally that much, but every penny counts right now. So that's something else to look at. Also, contact those state agencies if you have loans with them. If you're in default, believe it or not, a lot of state agencies are offering special programs to get the loans out of default. Those of you that have New Jersey class loans, they started allowing a rehabilitation plan where you come up and make an agreed 3 months of payments and your loan's out of default. VSAC is offering a 9-month payment plan to get your loan out of default. So there are things out there to help you. We're going through something that none of us have ever been through, and student loans. This is new for them as well. Student loans were not impacted the same way during the 2008-9 financial crisis that we had then. But every industry is being impacted now, and it's good to see private lenders stepping up. And so we'll see if there's an addendum or an addition to the CARES Act, if it will include the FEAL. That's really what we're watching for now. I'm not really seeing anything with Perkins loans. Perkins loans are not protected either. Those tend to be small anyway. But if you do need some help with those, contact your university, and they'll offer something to you. You can very easily make that Perkins loan a direct loan by doing a consolidation on just the Perkins loan. You're allowed to do it on just a single loan now. And that might be something to think about, because when you do that, the Perkins loan converts to a direct loan and you can have an IDR payment on that, an income-driven repayment. So that's really what I have for you. It's just a recap of the CARES Act. Again, it's good to see the Secretary DeVos is signing paperwork that will allow these defense to repayment applications to be processed. I'm glad to see Joe Biden has come out with a student loan forgiveness plan. I think a lot of that is through the endorsement of Bernie Sanders, who of course is my senator, being from Vermont. And I really think, they're setting the stage for a big debate of what happens with student loans. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the coming election. It'll be interesting to see how the coming election has actually happened, and if we're still under quarantine or what's going on. But there's a lot riding on this election that's not an endorsement of either candidate, but there's a lot of things just to watch in the mix. If I'm not seeing any questions thus far, so I will invite people. If you do have questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can leave a comment on this post. You can email me directly at jcohen, Cohen, at thestudentloanlawyer.com. You can also reach out to my website that way if you want some more research. If you ask me questions later, I'm happy to post them and to ask them in next week's live session. And please feel free to let other people know that these are going on. I think they've been extremely helpful. So I will be doing them every Wednesday at 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But with that, I will say thank you for watching, and I hope you all stay safe. Thank you.